But the Bush administration says, we're going to negotiate behind closed doors. They say this to Congress. And Congress, you would get no opportunity to weigh in on our negotiation. And when we finally come to the terms of a treaty with Mexico and other countries, you either buy it whole hog or you're against freedom.
That's what they do. Yeah.
It was a very strange deal that Congress made. But remember, at that point, everybody was pro-free trade. Like, it seemed like a great idea. Sure, let's try it.
Yeah.
By the way, the Soviet Union had just fallen, so, like, freedom was everywhere. And so we got NAFTA. And NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, it's astonishing how quickly the dominoes start to fall after that. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. Again, I was alive then. I saw it happening. You would go to, everybody worked at the Gap when I graduated from college. Is there even the Gap? Does that exist anymore? Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's still around.
Okay.
I got a couple Gap things in there.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
I mean, can you fact check that? I was actually thinking about the Gap yesterday. I was like, I'm going to bring up the Gap because everyone worked at the Gap. So you go to the Gap. This was in 5 years of NAFTA. You go to the Gap, and there would be piles of T-shirts, whatever crap people were buying, including me. I was buying that shit too. And you would like rifle through. Remember, I'm a reader, and I'm looking at these labels, and it's like made in Mexico, made in Guatemala, made in El Salvador, like, and it gets and it grows, right? Like when you start going through the stacks of clothes now, it's Vietnam, it's it's Bangladesh, it's
I still don't know where Bangladesh is.
Oh, really? It's like the north easternmost part of India. It's like this little piece of it.
Pull that up on a map.
All right.
I never looked. Keep going. Though.
But the problem is it's like very low to sea level, and so they do flood a lot. And anyway,
Okay.
And Cambodia now you see. Anyway, so you're starting to rifle through this stuff, and stuff is made everywhere, and that happens in an incredibly short period of time.
Yeah.
Incredibly short period of time. The floodgates opened, and then industry was gone.
Now, so you said this is about a 5-year period, so it's quick. But when the manufacturing immediately starts going over there because of NAFTA, we're now introducing human rights issues, though, because this is where, I mean, in school they taught us about the sweatshops back in the 1800s and stuff, some of which a lot of it was happening here.
Right here.
Now we're doing it somewhere else, like where, I love Nike, but my Nike was made by some like slave 8-year-old kid in Cambodia. I do feel bad about it. I thank him for doing it, but I do feel bad about that. You know what I mean? And this is where that all started. And now it's even infected. We were talking before we got on camera. It's affected things like tech, and where we talked about the cobalt mining and stuff. So all the jobs that now got that in these human rights massacre situations back home, all those jobs, those people are laid off, right?
Yeah, they just
They're
lose
gone.
their jobs. And the issue is that America did not have what we like to call an industrial policy. So there was no infrastructure for helping people transition now from whatever they were doing to whatever they needed to do to be able to survive. Yeah. The government was just basically gone. And there were company towns, and we know this, like Akron, Ohio, which is, I think, one of the most depressed cities maybe in the country at this point. But manufacturing had, it was all over the country. It was in Kentucky and Mississippi and Alabama, and there were these like small factory towns that made one thing. I write about Fruit of the Loom. So there was one town in Kentucky where Fruit of the Loom employed 20,000 people, and that's what everybody did there. They worked for Fruit of the Loom. And then suddenly Fruit of the Loom was gone.
Yeah.
And what do you do? What do you do? There was nothing. Nobody was prepared for the gutting of these towns when industry left.
That was a big That was a big phenomenon with Trump, too. And it's one place, at least for political messaging, it's one of the places you have to give him some credit is how he spoke to these people. You know, I'm someone who cares a lot about the environment, right? I know there's no such thing as clean coal. I know it's not good for the environment, right?
It's an oxymoron.
When he would say that, I'm like, what are you doing? But the people who lived in those coal mining towns, and you just describe a couple other types of examples. I've been to those coal mining towns. Their father was in the mine. Their grandfather was in the mine. Their great-grandfather was in the mine. They are treading water right at the top, trying not to drown to get by. Yeah. And they don't know anything else because they've never been given the resources to not be a coal mining town in the middle of fucking nowhere in Pennsylvania.
Right.
You know? Yeah. And so I looked at this and I said, okay, these are the people very often who put Trump in office. And if you're not happy about that, that's fine. But you need to look at the root cause because, by the way, it's a bipartisan problem. Yeah. He was an outsider with this stuff, and he came in and spoke to those people because they'd been forgotten about. And how do you solve that, though? How do we go into towns like Akron? Where was the town in Kentucky you mentioned?
Yeah, I'm blanking on the town. I'm sorry, but we could.
All right, the town in Kentucky or like the coal mining towns in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and suddenly be like, all right, today you're going to learn, what was the old quote, like learn to code or whatever? Today you're going to learn to code. Like, how do you go in and change the culture there for people who are doing nothing but making a living and doing hard work and doing their best?
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I'm talking about with industrial policy. It's a holistic look at people and work and job training, right? And so to your point, I want to actually talk about this a little bit. I mean, I don't know if now we're done with NAFTA and we're moving on to like what's happening right now, but I want to talk about, can I pause this conversation, just talk about men?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to talk about men in America because the data shows that men are not doing well. And this is something that I think traditionally liberal people have not been thinking about a lot. And I think that's where Trump got a lot of traction. But the data does absolutely support that men in America are not doing well. And there are a million reasons, I'm sure, for this. And, you could bring in any thinker and they'll come up with a different theory. My view is through manufacturing. And I would say from being an educator, working with kids, there are people who aren't really made for sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. There are kids who probably just shouldn't go to college. Not because college is a terrible idea of blah, 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 but because they're just ill-suited. Like, they'd be much happier being outside or working with their hands.
Yes.
I'm not being Pollyannish about it. I mean, humans, right? I mean, for 50,000 years, we developed these in tandem with this.
Yes.
We love to work with our hands. We love to produce things. We love to see the fruits of our labor. And so, again, I don't want to be Pollyannish about this. Like, I don't want to act like there's some utopian solution to every problem. But I do think that there's a large percentage of the population that would feel really good about making things.
Yeah. I agree. 100%. And this is a conversation I'll go back and forth with in the DMs with fans about, because it's good timing to do this podcast with you because it's something people bring up to me. I have one longtime fan, this guy Joel, shout out Joel, who went to trade school, right? Because he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew he eventually wanted to own his own contracting company, what he wanted to build, etc. He was like, wait, why am I going to go? I could go get, B+ and A- in college for some degree that makes me sit at a desk all day and hate myself when I'm 30. Or I like building shit. Yeah. I'm going to go out and build stuff. And the two words you didn't use there, but I think are right in the middle of it, are the mental health with that. Yeah. This right here, this is not natural. All right? Sitting under fluorescent lights like this, because I got to tell you,
I was going to say, like, what is this light about anyway? Yeah, this is a terrible light.
It's a nice-ass light. But it's a nice-ass light to be on camera when you're in a studio like this. Yeah. But I I've lived in a studio for 4 years. One of the reasons when I got my new place that I wanted to get the one I got is because it has light everywhere, natural light coming in, right? I go for walks on the Hudson River every single day.
Nice.
Like, I value this stuff because I'm like, I watch my body like shrivel up doing this. And then I think about all these people who aren't lucky enough to be building something that's theirs, number one, so you're less into it with that case. They're stuck on the same salary. There's a limited ceiling that they have, and they're stuck in these little boxes all day. And, when I was first out of college and I was working on Wall Street, I remember seeing the people go outside every day, like some of the adults, that's what I call it. But they go outside and like go for a walk around the parking lot. And I was like, what the fuck are they doing? Yeah. And a couple years later, I was like, I understand now that you got to get out, that you got to be outside of this shit. And so I remember I brought my cousin. She was coming out of college, and I'd been working there about 3 years. I brought her by the office one Saturday morning when I had to pick something up, and she was in town. And I just took her to each, we worked in an enormous office. It was a big producing office for Merrill Lynch. So there's just desks everywhere, right? And I walked her to different parts of the office, and she was a marketing major. And I just asked her to creatively tell me what she saw. And there was one particular section of the office that probably had like 60 different desks, and everything's gray. I mean, the shittiest, that light gray that no one likes, with like the fuzz on the side just to piss you off even more, on the sides of the cubicles where it's not even hard. It's like literally fuzzy. Yeah. But not the good fuzzy. And you look around, there's just drab, like, whatever that's called, like computer parts of the desk, and then the computers are Dells from '08, God forbid they buy you good stuff at a bank. And I'm like, what do you see? And she's like, destruction of people. Wow. And I'm like, whoa, that's spot on. And it just, they don't teach you, and I'm not blaming college for this, they don't teach you this stuff in college. But now, we got to have some sort of, I'm glad you're bringing it up, because we have to have some sort of societal awareness that it's okay to figure out that, like, hey, maybe that system right there isn't for me. Yeah. And maybe even if kids don't know that, we have to find ways to have conversations so that they can come to an answer that maybe they think, right?
Yes, absolutely. Right. So the other piece of that, so yes, bringing back manufacturing, which will happen, also offers our kids different kinds of opportunities that are not necessarily tied to seeking an extremely expensive 4-year degree, and also allows people to move up through organizations. You can really, really start at the bottom. Yeah. Is it the head of GM, I think? Can you help me out here? She's a woman.
Mary Jo, whatever, Mary Barra.
Thank you. Right? Yeah, I'm blanking on her name. I'm not great with this stuff.
Mary Barra.
She started at the bottom. She started. I believe she started as a line worker. You can look that up, or working on the line,
which they don't have anymore.
Right. Well, yeah, it's fading. But the point is that manufacturing allows people to come in at any level. Yeah. And when you know the process, then you have knowledge that then you can use to move up. What was that? I'm blanking because I was just about to say something, but let's talk about innovation. Okay. How do you innovate? How do you come up with a new idea?
You put brains together and you get creative.
Okay. Yeah, that is true. You can come up with any kind of idea you want, but in order to execute, you need to know how to make thing. So let's go back to Apple or Steve Jobs or something like that. These guys were physically building computers in their garages, right? Wozniak, thank you. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't actually read the book. When you think about the best innovations in the United States, even pharmaceutical companies, where does that stuff start? How do you get a drug to market? Where does that start? That starts with people in labs, dripping stuff into other stuff and heating it and spinning it and that sort of thing. And, doing all kinds of testing. And then ultimately you get a drug that needs to be manufactured. But the point is that the people who are doing the innovating are making. They're using their hands, they're experimenting, they're innovating, they know how to manufacture things. So they're starting from a manufacturing standpoint,
Yes.
right? So computers, we talked about computers, technology, robots. The kids who are looking at robotics these days, they start by building robots, right?
Yes.
They don't start by programming robots. All the kids I know who are in robotics, they start by building them. So in order to innovate, you need to know how to build this thing so that then you can communicate with the other people who need to help you build this thing and put the parts together to actually create. So when we gave up manufacturing, we're giving up this incredible pot, this stew of knowledge that's not just I want to do something, but also the know-how to build it.
Yes, it's a good feeling too.
Oh, it's the best. So
You like this table?
I was gonna ask you, did you guys make this?
Me and Danny Jones, who runs another big podcast in Florida, a really good friend of mine, flew him up here, and we built this table in a weekend. And I got to tell you, when it was done, I was like, "Let's go!"
Right?
That feels so good.
God,
it's
it
amazing.
feels so good.
Every time I sit here, I'm like, "Damn, we're signed below. That's cool."
It's right there.
Yeah.
Your pride is right there.
I love Home Depot. You know what I mean?
Home Depot's fun.
And that's what I'm saying. That represents manufacturing again.
There you go.
Bit,
you walk in there and you're like, possibility.
Yes.
But you know the possibility because you've made stuff. And maybe you started making stuff with your father or your mother. Your mother, I don't want to be binary. So somebody had to make the food and somebody had to fix the toilet. And so, that's all about understanding how things work, how things go together, how to manufacture.
Yeah. And so we lost that quickly with NAFTA. And then there was another big agreement.
Another beat is WTO. And
yes. Can you explain all this?
Oh, God, I wish I could. I'm going to try.
Okay.
So in 1996, several countries got together. I'm going to say 130, but you're going to fact check me. Maybe it was 72. I don't know. Lots of numbers in my head.
A lot of countries.
Got together and formed the World Trade Organization, which, in a nutshell, worked hand in hand with the free trade movement to reduce obstacles to free trade. And we were talking about obstacles like environmental regulation and labor regulation, those slow down trade. And so the World Trade Organization was there to help countries and companies litigate, mostly companies litigating against countries that they felt were slowing down their ability to make a profit.
So Interpol for capitalists.
Oh, God, I love that.
That's good, right?
Can I use that?
Yeah, you can use that.
Okay, so that's
on
that's
tape.
good.
It's on record.
I'll just say copyright Julian Dorey. Okay. So that's exactly right. So here, countries could go to their representatives and say, companies. Did I say countries? Companies like Kodak could go to their American representative and say, go fucking sue Japan because they're making it hard for us, Kodak, to penetrate the Japanese market. They are favoring their own brands. Fuji in the 1990s.
Yeah.
This was a big lawsuit.
I guess this didn't work out with China too well, huh?
Well, at that time, China didn't have a free trade agreement.
But
Fuji,
thinking now.
Fuji was actually Japanese.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm
okay.
talking in the future though, because we didn't do this very well with China. All our companies just left.
We didn't do what well?
We didn't do well with if China was causing competition problems, fixing it. You know what I mean? Literally, Google left China. A lot of our companies left the market.
Right.
There.
Right. Exactly.
I was cutting ahead, but
yeah. No, that's totally fine. Yeah, you're right about that. A fishing cartel, a tuna fishing cartel, for example, in Mexico, sued the United States because, do you remember the little dolphin label on tuna fish?
And say this was in that movie Seaspiracy, I think.
Okay.
It's all bullshit.
Well, yeah, you're probably right about that. I'm not going to go there. It may be bullshit. But anyway, Mexico sued the United States because we had this little dolphin safe label, because the idea was that the tuna was line caught. So then the dolphins weren't getting caught in nets. But the problem is this major tuna fishing cartel in Mexico didn't use lines. They used nets. And they said that the labeling, the dolphin safe labeling in America was cutting in on their ability to sell tuna in the United States. They won this case in the WTO. I just want to give a couple of examples of like what free trade actually looks like, and especially when you allow countries again, it's important to understand companies to sue countries for making legislation that they feel is slowing down their ability to make profit in that country.
And the countries who actually have an advantage here are the ones with the biggest GDP, like, the top three in that type of situation, because everyone else is, money talks. You are essentially a hostage to what they're going to support. So if there's some sort of case brought vis-a-vis the WTO and the U.S. says, you know what, yeah, we agree with that, and you're like fucking Cambodia, what are you going to do? Be like, no. You're done.
It's a little bit about that, but it's a lot more about, like, think about why the WTO exists at all. Their mandate is to ensure that no country is slowing down any corporation's ability to make money.
Which is supposed to put more money into the economy and more money into people of the world, but what it ends up doing is it kind of creates a wealth gap, is what you're saying.
Oh, a major wealth gap.
Yeah.
And an environmental wealth gap.
Well, yeah, that too. But, yeah, because, like, we're seeing more billionaires around the world stamped every day than ever before. Yeah. And I was talking with someone, actually it was about AI, but it's the same idea here.
We can talk about AI.
I was talking with someone about, 5-6 months ago, who was telling me that this stamping of new billionaires into eventually like trillionaires is going to keep happening over the next 5 to 10 years, and then the gap is going to be so wide there's no return. And he said, and it was a really negative way to look at stuff, but he was just trying to give his prediction. He's like, you're going to have wealth in the hands of so few that it will control every lever of government everywhere around the world, and politicians will be paid off, and the people will be left to get their universal basic income stands. In many ways, that's scary.
I don't know why he doesn't think that it's already happened.
Well, it has, but he's saying it's point of no return, like it can't be fixed.
So I would argue that the antidote to that is manufacturing. Again, it's not just like, to a hammer, all the world is a nail. Like the ability to be able to make things. Let me back up one click. 10% of the GDP of America is still manufacturing based. Yes.
I didn't know it's that high.
We are making things. And what's really fascinating is that it's a lot of mom and pop shops.
Well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's why we don't really think about them. They're not really on our radar. But there are little manufacturing factories all over this country. I think, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they average 100 employees or less. Mm-hmm. But they're making things. And that is the alternative, right? That is the alternative to what you are describing, which is an incredible amount of wealth in the hands of the few. When we start to recognize that we can lift up communities and support each other by buying locally, which in this case means domestically, but then we can start to talk about actually like local manufacturing. And actually even go further by creating, get this, a circular economy where your waste, so like all your plastics and glass and other things are then being recycled. Especially here in New York, you could easily do this, recycled maybe on the periphery of New York and then sent back into industries here in New York. Like that's the circular economy right there.
That's what Eric Olson's working on. It's like the exact thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this guy I had on the podcast. I'll show you.
Wow.
Afterwards. He came from big oil, left it. It was his first job out of college and was like, wait, there's a middle ground solution here. And he's basically building these things that measure for plastics and waste, so that it could be collected and then recycled, but there's all kinds of other terminology with it, to be reused within the same place.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That's super real. I mean, the Chinese don't want our trash now anyway, so we got to get rid of it. So instead of burying it, if we actually manufactured here, imagine now you have a buyer for all of this waste, if we can figure this out. So there's actually a company in New York City, I think it's called, you can look it up, Ice Stone. Ice Stone. And they make beautiful countertops out of recycled glass.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think they're in the Brooklyn Yards, Brooklyn Navy Yards?
That sounds right. I mean, okay, here we go.
Made in USA.
Wait, they're making it out of glass?
Yeah, recycled glass.
So wait, that thing right there.
I mean, it's got probably polymers and all kinds of stuff in it, but yeah.
That's and it's all made right here.
It's made in Brooklyn, New York.
Let's go.
I mean, this is not tough stuff.
Shout out to Ice Stone.
Yeah, shout out to Ice Stone. My point is, this is not hard. It's actually not hard. It's actually
can I challenge
very
that?
simple. Okay, go ahead. Or, sorry, as the Philly girl would say, go ahead.
I forgot you're from Philly.
Go ahead.
How do you compete on some of this if you're competing with the 10-year-old working for 50 cents in Vietnam?
Right. Okay. So first of all, like, Vietnam is doing really, really well. And it's no longer going to be viable to manufacture in Vietnam at some point.
Bangladesh.
So that's going to keep happening, right? So it's always, when you're talking about offshoring, it's like always a race to the bottom. And that's another thing that I write about is free capital just coming into countries, assaulting them with, cash, and then boom, they're gone, which we saw during the pandemic. How are you going to, well, first of all, when you're talking about something like countertops, that shit is heavy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard to get here.
When you think about the infrastructure required to get stuff to the United States, you start to think about how it's analogous to like the fossil fuel industry. So the fossil fuel industry, in order to function in America, is subsidized by the government. It's extremely expensive to extract fossil fuels and refine them, right? Both actually economically and environmentally.
Sure.
Okay. So following NAFTA, following all this free trade zeal, a whole infrastructure has been designed to get goods into the United States, right? And it's a very expensive infrastructure. It's about, and this goes to my first book, it's about shipping and ports and highways and widening the Panama Canal and dredging New York, New Jersey port and raising bridges so that you can get these supermax ships in. So that's the expenses that we don't think about.
Yeah.
When it comes to what are we actually paying for as Americans when we import all these things. Back to the countertops. This is a big, heavy thing. Might as well just make it here. Probably you're saving 30% on transportation costs. So I would imagine that they could compete pretty well with countertops made in other parts of the world.
So let me ask this then.
Yeah.
Is this a problem we can solve by doubling down on strengths and just eliminating weaknesses? And let me put an image on that. Doubling down on things like countertops and heavier stuff that would be expensive to get in here and just completely saying fuck it with clothes.
Okay. Good question.
Because your book is about
apparel.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking.
Which is like the lowest common denominator. To make apparel, all you need is a worker and a machine and some other stuff.
And a sweatshop.
Well, you don't need a sweatshop. I think that we can make anything here. I really, really do. And that's actually why I focused on apparel. What's happening in manufacturing, of course, we know this, is AI and robotics, right? So in almost every industry, there are fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer workers. So what you actually need is space, electricity, robots, and you need people to service the robots. And then everything that spins out of that. You need people to sell the stuff and market the stuff and carry the stuff to the end buyer and, whatever it takes. So as manufacturing becomes so much more sophisticated. Remember, I live in Boston, so I'm right there at MIT. They're crazy building robots all the time. They do all kinds of weird stuff like the headless dog. I don't know if you ever saw.
That's the Boston whatever group.
Boston Dynamics.
Boston Robotics.
Yeah. So, like, I'm very well aware. But, you know, the bar for robotics is getting lower and lower and lower. And so these trade schools should be teaching robotics, because what we will be able to do extremely well as Americans with our sophisticated manufacturing infrastructure is tons of customization. We can also, so we can respond also we will be able to respond very quickly to market changes. So, for example, if you are making a pharmaceutical product and you have kind of a robot army doing a lot of the manufacturing, you have these people coming in who have robotics training, not necessarily a 4-year degree from a college, but actually they got vocational training. They can quickly set up the shop floor to produce something new or introduce a new reagent. So robots are becoming much safer to work with. It's also the bar for programming them or customizing what they do is becoming easier. And so we can make anything. We will be able to make anything. And I think it's really important to be able to make anything, because what you make versus what you import will completely dictate your politics.
Yeah. Our Discord and Patreon links are in the description. We are starting to do AMAs on Discord, and we are also now releasing a new show called the Julian and Alessi Show with my producer, Alessi Allaman, on Patreon, along with some other exclusive content from episodes that we have been putting out on YouTube that are not seen on YouTube.
If you're not making your own pharmaceuticals, and by the way, we don't. So 90%...
Huge problem.
90% of our pharmaceuticals come from India and China.
Huge problem.
We know it is now. It's funny, when I was doing book talks for my last book about shipping, you know, I would tell people like 90% of everything that you touch has spent some time on a container ship.
Yes.
And people will be like, what? You know, that can't be right. But
well, I guess it depends. Like, if you're someone who lives on the coast like I have my whole life, I guess I take that for granted. Yeah. Because I always see the ships. Right. I'm like, oh yeah, there they come again. That's supplying the whole fucking northern part of the state.
You know, it's so funny because I was talking to somebody from Missouri.
There you go.
Or was it Arkansas?
They don't have oceans there.
It was pretty landlocked.
Right.
And I was like, when was the last time you saw a body of water? And he was like, well, like a lake. He had no idea how stuff got to him.
Right.
And I said, well, chances are it's either coming through, you know, L.A., like a huge port in L.A.
Not around here.
Exactly. Or it's coming through the Panama Canal, coming up maybe through like Nolens or Savannah or something like that, getting trucked to you. You know, maybe it's coming up through the Mississippi. I don't know. But like, think about it, dude. Just think a little, because it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah. And so that's like the whole other thing too, because the recent history of this saw huge changes with COVID, because, and I want to get into the pharmaceutical thing, but let's put a pin in that for a minute. But to me, if you're looking at COVID and you're like, oh, you know, trying to let this leak out of their lab and everything, that's fine. But it did kind of backfire on them, no? Because they had all the supply chains, then they shut everything down. So companies here diversified their supply chains to other countries. Did that have any backstream effect, though, on bringing some things back to America when that happened? Did we see the numbers that support that?
Oh, 100%. Oh, it's actually really wild what's happening. So the buzzword of the day is onshoring.
Okay.
The opposite of offshoring.
Yeah.
Or outsourcing. And companies, the big ones, the little ones, everybody is desperate to protect their supply chain from the next disaster, whatever that'll be. And they found that it's very difficult, but it's worth it, because nobody wants to be caught with their pants down like they were during the pandemic. That was super embarrassing for us. I mean, we didn't have things that we need. And actually that brings me to my book, because I found a company that was making apparel.
And they went to PPE.
Well, yeah. So they're making apparel. They were making hoodies, beautiful hoodies, extremely well made, all American sourced hoodies, and all of their workers were union workers. They were unionized. They were part of United Steel. And suddenly they saw with the pandemic that not only would they have to shut down, but they might die. Like, they were facing bankruptcy. There was no way that they would be able to sell their goods. And so if they had to shut down for like 5 months, they wouldn't be able to pay their bills and they'd be done. It's a husband and wife team. Like they put everything, their heart and soul into this small company making hoodies. And so they did shut down. This is March. It's the end of March 2020. They shut down because nobody knew what this thing was that we were looking at. And then they took a minute to think. And the wife, Whitney Waxman, said to Ben, her husband, they were watching the news. They were looking at what was happening in New York, you know, with the nurses and the doctors, and it was a hellscape. And the first responders are saying, we're running out of, we're going to get to a point where we have to wear trash bags. And so Whitney turned to Ben and said, we got to do something. And she said, we make things. We can do this. And they brought back their workers a week later, and they said, if we asked you to come back and we will lay out the factory floor so that you get the 6 feet, and we're going to put down a lot of plastic and hang, you know, we didn't know how the pandemic spread, but they were like, if we did everything in our power to protect you as workers, would you come back to make masks for first responders? Now, I want you to remember that these are new Americans for the most part. They're coming from Congo and Vietnam and Ethiopia. The workers, yes. These are new Americans in Portland, Maine, okay? Many of them can't even speak English, or their English is not that great. They're coming from Iraq and Iran. I mean, this was a real multinational group of new Americans. They're citizens. And so Ben and Whitney said to them, we understand that you are putting yourselves at risk, and you could stay home and you could get checks from the government. Every single hand went up. They said, we will come back. Wow. We will do this. And when Ben and Whitney said, this is amazing, but why? One of the guys who came from Iraq, he stood up and he said, I'm an American. I'm going to do this for my fellow Americans. Yeah,
that's amazing.
They did it. They did it.
Because we remember back then, I mean, you just pointed to it, but people were making, it was a huge problem for all the business owners I knew. People were making more money sitting on the couch than what they were making before everything shut down. And it made it so difficult for places. But they got this thing up and running then. This is the end of March, you said?
So at the end of March, they shut down. By early April, they were starting to make masks, and then they were running into supply chain issues, which is another
what happened
story. Well, it became very difficult to get elastic for the ear bands, and they actually ended up running a piece in the Washington Post, an op-ed piece that said the government needs to, you know, help people who are trying to manufacture find each other so that we can get this supply chain going. But fortunately, Ben came from a union background. He had worked at the AFL-CIO for a decade and knew everybody, all the leadership at the AFL-CIO. And through that network, he was able to, it's actually quite an amazing story. But
well, let's tell it. That's what we're here for.
Okay. All right. So one of the things,
and this is all in your book, by the way.
It is.
Making It in America.
I mean, this is the
Ben
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were no like patterns for developing a mask, but these are apparel workers. So they went to a friend who was a physicist at I think University of Connecticut, and they said, "Help us design a mask from scratch. What do we need?" They had cotton jersey. And he said, all right, let's do a 2-ply, so 2 layers of cotton jersey, and in between, I think we should put a filter in there, a paper filter. And they said, oh, you know, what does that look like? Where are we going to get that filter? Like, what is that thing? And so he created a specification for the kind of paper that he thought would be good for blocking what we thought we knew about COVID.
Right.
Remember, we had no information.
Yeah, we knew shit at that point.
And just go below it.
Yep.
So
you can move this like that.
Oh,
you can hold that.
So excellent.
That?
Okay, yeah, there we go. All right.
You just added a couple inches there.
Yeah, I did. I was like, which is, I guess, how I work. I just, you know, I fit to I'm like a gas. I fit to whatever container I'm given. But so so they have the specification for paper. One thing you need to know about Maine is that they make paper in Maine. There used to be tons of paper mills in Maine. They've shut down one by one. It's not a really beautiful thing to make. It's very messy and stinky. But anyway, through their union network, a paper mill VP reaches out to them and says, what do you need for paper? What does this filter look like? What are the specs? And they're like, oh, shit. We might have an ally here. So
it's like the Avengers of manufacturing.
100%, man. So they tell him, and he's like, all right, hang on. And literally 5 hours later, he says, I'm going to send you a couple samples. Let me know what works for you. Sends them samples. They send it to their guy. The guy says this one. Now they have a source for their filter.
And where was that guy? So
he was in Maine.
Yeah, but he was making everything, like, where was his supply chain?
Oh, so paper, I haven't gone into that, but like paper comes from trees, obviously, and so tree pulp. And so it's a very robust industry, or it was in Maine. So, the trees, you cut down trees, you have piles and piles of pulp. And so paper is used in all kinds of industrial there are all kinds of industrial uses for paper. It's not just like paper for magazines and books, and probably your viewers are like, what are magazines and books? But anyway, so he had a product that would work. And so it was just like, you cut it, you sell it with the mask. And their deal was, if you buy a mask from them, then they would donate to first responders. They ended up getting, because they're union and because they were local, they ended up getting like pretty huge contracts. I think with New Jersey State Troopers, in fact, since we're here in New Jersey, New York, and I think Maine State bought, tens of thousands, and they got big really fast because people needed these things. Wow. They were beautifully made. Because they had been built from scratch. Remember when I said about innovation, like you can't innovate unless you know how to make? Yeah. It's like they created this thing from nothing, but it came from all of their know-how in the apparel industry. They were also making face shields for first responders, so it was this plastic. And I think at one point they were also making gowns, and that's what kept them alive through 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
But they were around a while before that, making the hoodies, right?
Yeah, they've been making the hoodies for like 5 years before that.
So what was and you met them in 2020 when they were doing this part with the COVID response, and that's how the story came together. But what was the original idea here? I would imagine they were very upset about all the jobs going overseas, and they wanted to bring it here. So they're like, we're gonna do the easiest one, the apparel industry, which is the easiest to send overseas, and we're gonna prove we could do it here, and that was it.
Oh, kind of. So Ben, I mentioned that he came from the AFL-CIO. Mm-hmm. So he's a Mainer. He was born and raised in Maine, and he was sent all around the country between 2003 and 2013, or 2002 and 2012. To represent workers. So I mentioned Whirlpool. Like, he was there when the Whirlpool factory shut down, trying to negotiate with Whirlpool and the family, the Crown family, big supporters of Obama, by the way, to keep the factory open, keep the jobs here. So he was in Ohio, he was in Detroit, he was like all over in Pennsylvania, seeing how the loss of manufacturing was just destroying communities. And he came out of that decade kind of a broken man, but a man who had a dream. And the dream was that we could build manufacturing. And if we did that, manufacturing would rebuild community. Like, he saw how the two were so tied. So he came back to Portland, Maine, and he sat on his couch and he tried to figure out what he could build. He even thought of like becoming a shipbuilder, believe it or not. Like, he was willing to consider anything. And one day he was like just plowing driveways for a friend. And so, because it's Maine, and he was in his plow truck or tow truck, whatever the heck it was, with the plow in the front. And he was wearing a fleece vest. And it was from some Democrat's campaign for something, I don't remember. And he goes, where the fuck is this thing made? You know? And he's like me, pulls it off, looks at the label, and it says, made in El Salvador. And he was like, what the fuck? We can't even make a fleece vest here?
Right.
That was made
of a U.S. politician, nonetheless. Yeah.
It was made of fleece, which at the time was actually made in Massachusetts. Polar fleece was invented in Massachusetts by a textile company, an 80-year-old textile company. That's another beautiful story that's in the book. So it was a local fabric, but the fabric itself had to be cut and sewed in El Salvador. And I think that's when you realize, like, this is bullshit. We can do anything. We can make our own clothes. Like, let's just start there. Also, his mother had a company that
got shut down, right?
Yeah, from NAFTA. So she actually was making these beautiful wool blankets and cloaks because, again, in Maine, Maine is like a mystery to a lot of people, but actually it was an industrial epicenter. So at one point it was the shoe-making capital of the United States. Yeah, it was a huge source of paper, but it was also a huge textile state. And so there were these like textile companies all over Maine that made these beautiful wool felts and fabrics. Like if you had a pool table that was covered with felt, chances were the felt was made in Maine. Yeah.
Whoa.
And these were like small mill towns. Again, you don't need a lot of people to make this stuff because of the Industrial Revolution. Like making textiles doesn't require a lot of people, just a lot of space and machines.
How many people live in Maine? Can we look that up?
1 million.
Really?
Less than 1 million, yeah.
20,000.
I was going to say, I thought it was like 10 people. That's amazing. They got this whole textile thing. They didn't know anything about it. I'm very Jersey-centric.
No, that's okay. It's good that you're Jersey-centric, and it's good you're asking. Yeah, 1.3 million. Okay.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of people.
So here, I love this. This is like, you like history. You're like me. You love history. Who were the laborers in all these Maine mills?
What is that, like a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question. It's like, how much do you know history? And probably you don't know much about Maine history because you're not from Maine.
I don't know shit about Maine.
Okay, so like, who was working in the factories? Who's doing like this low level factory work?
The laborers?
Yeah. Like, where did they come from?
Maine? Italy?
Oh, I like that. They were Quebecois. They were coming from Quebec.
Wait, that's like a term, Quebecois?
Yeah.
That's how you say it?
Yeah.
I thought it was like Quebecer or something.
Well, yeah, Quebec is a place.
Yeah, no, I thought you called them like Quebecers or something like that.
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Quebecois.
Quebecois.
Okay. All right. I'll go with it.
Okay.
So they were from, they would come across the border just to work and then go back?
They would walk.
Well.
Oh, they walk across the border. So Celine Dion, you remember?
I know Celine Dion.
You know her? Do you know her?
Yeah.
She's Quebecois.
Yeah.
And you remember her backstory, like why we love her?
The husband died.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, sorry. I shouldn't ask you these questions.
She did the Titanic.
She did.
Yeah. It's great.
She
song.
came from a dirt poor Quebecois family. So I don't want to get too much into it. You should have a Quebecois on your show. But
okay. I'll get Celine in here.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, you might really enjoy talking to her.
I'd love to talk to Celine.
So the screwed up thing about the Quebecois is they were treated really, really terribly by the Canadian government because the Canadian government was English.
Oh, that's right. They're Frenchies. I forgot about that.
So the Quebecois were come up with a really derogatory name of Canada.
Right.
And they were fiercely French and they were fiercely Catholic as opposed to the white Protestant English settlers who ran the country. And so they had big families and they were farming families and they were totally starved by the Canadians because the Canadians truly hated them. I say Canadians, but I mean like those
the
other
non-Quebecers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they were profoundly poor. They were starving and they were uneducated. And they would come across the border into Maine and Massachusetts. And I wanted to point out that, I don't know if you remember, Maine had a governor. His name was LePage. Do you remember?
Yeah, that's not that long ago.
No, it wasn't. A couple years ago.
He was like the fat guy?
He was a fat guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to fat shame anybody, but he was a heavyset gentleman who was a proto-Trump in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Interesting story. He was born in Maine, okay? And his first language, he did not speak English. His first language, until he started going to public school, was French.
And he was born in Maine.
Born in Maine.
So he was like living in the warehouses with the Quebecers?
Well, he was Quebecois.
Oh, he was.
Well,
but
I mean,
he was...
his family was...
Oh, I got it now. Gotcha.
So the Quebecois, in many ways, refused to kind of assimilate in Maine, and they kept to themselves, and they kept their language, and they kept their culture. Another famous Quebecois, I assume he's Quebecois, is Yvon... I'm going to Chouinard. I forget the guy who founded Patagonia. He's from Maine.
Yes, Yvon Chouinard. Yeah.
Right? Chouinard?
It's something Chouinard.
Why does he have a French name? Why do all these people from Maine have French names? It's because their families came from Quebec.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Unknown part of history for me.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, some of the Flyers, like our Philadelphia Flyers, still come from Quebec, and they talk different. Right?
They talk different.
They totally talk different. It's not like E. It's like ew, or whatever the French accent is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, because they're actually French. I mean, they're French Canadian.
Right, and they speak it too. It's
they
like
do.
Je lutois la hockey.
It's a real thing.
Right. Yeah. I'm butchering French right now. I'm sorry. But so the Quebecers, Quebecois.
There you go.
Were the people who.
Such a quick learner.
Like what years are we talking they first started doing this? Like the 1870s, 18... Okay.
Yeah,
Wow, it goes
exactly.
back that far.
Oh, yeah, it does go back that far.
So literal beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
Well, the Industrial Revolution started...
Well, yes, but when I say that, I mean like immediately post Vanderbilt and Steel Guy Carnegie.
Yeah,
those
exactly.
kind of years.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, they were coming down pretty early on, and sending money back, and then people just kept coming. I mean, the situation, I've read a little bit about this. I'm not by any means an expert, but the situation in Quebec was it would make the hair on the back of your neck just go
that bad.
Oh yeah, it was bad. They were really being deliberately starved. I don't want to make a false comparison, but my understanding is that it was something like how the Irish were treated by the English. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, that's like another forgotten part of history with America. I mean, man, we had some bad track records with immigrant groups in America.
Oh, really?
Kind of, we messed that up a time or 10. But okay, so they build that up, and then what years? NAFTA comes in early 90s, but in the 60s, 70s, 80s, were the textile mills in Maine still enormous, or were they starting to fall off post World War II a little bit?
Post World War II. Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of things happen. If you're talking about textiles, so the Maine textile industry was really built around wool. And by the way, the wool, some of it was homegrown, but a lot of it actually was coming from Australia really, really early on, which surprised me. I didn't know that. So after World War II, times change, and all these new fibers come into being. So we start to get rayon, we get nylon, we get like all these petroleum product things as well. And I think what happened for a lot of the mills is that they didn't change quickly enough to appeal to kind of these new products. And so a lot of the woolens that they're making, which are, by the way, absolutely beautiful stuff. I mean, have you ever seen like a Hudson Bay blanket? L.L. Bean used to sell them.
Yeah, can we look that up? Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Hudson Bay?
I mean, that's what's coming to mind, but like a Hudson Bay blanket or Melton's.
Like that stuff?
Yeah. So
yeah, sure.
I'm actually wearing.
Yes, I've seen that.
Okay, so these are like woven wool products. You can pass it down to your great grandchildren as long as you don't have a moth infestation.
Right.
So these beautiful fabrics were made in Maine. So they're woven wools, and
Whoa.
I think what happened was a lot of the mills just weren't set up to make these synthetic goods. So
can you explain that to people? synthetic goods as opposed
yeah,
to
so
just making the real thing.
I mean, probably everything that you're wearing has a little bit of nylon in it or some kind of, synthetic fibers that either come from the petroleum industry or other things. I mean, this is actually a serious problem with fast fashion, is that a lot of the clothing that's made through fast fashion has a strong petroleum component to it, which means that it's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. Okay, so wait, hold on. If you don't mind me digressing for just 1 second, because I am misdigression here.
I like it.
That's MISS, misdigression. Okay, this is a fun story. This is this I could not believe. So what do you do when you go through your closet and you're like, okay, I want to get rid of a bunch of stuff, and you put all that stuff in a trash bag and you take it to
Goodwill.
Okay, you take it to Goodwill. You're a good person. You take it to Goodwill. Well,
I try to be a good person.
Okay, but if the Goodwill is closed, what's your second option? Where do people take stuff? Where do you take stuff?
The homeless shelter?
Oh, you're a doubly extra good person. People do what Julian does. Okay, so
Yeah.
a lot of people put them in these bins that are in parking lot. Okay, you're urban, so yeah. So there are these bins all over America in parking lots, and it says, put your used clothing here. You know what I'm talking about?
You know what this is?
Here, why don't you pull it up?
Yeah, we have those in California. I know what you're talking about. They have a bunch where they're not associated with Goodwill or anywhere, but they're just a green. They look like a garbage can.
Yeah.
And you just throw it in
A
there.
dumpster.
I've been there a few times.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
it looks
that's where you got that jacket.
Oh my god! So they look like I would say they look like a huge post box, like they have or an oven even. Like they have a big handle. You pull down the handle, you toss your shit in there, and then it's gone, and you don't think about it anymore.
Right.
So that stuff, for the most part, goes to Uganda.
Why Uganda?
I can't exactly tell you why Uganda, but I can tell why Uganda. But I can tell you that this started in the 70s, that these clothing bins would send the clothes to Uganda. And this created an incredible opportunity for Ugandans because they took the clothes and they made them their own. So a lot of the clothes, Americans were bigger typically than Ugandans, and they had different aesthetic than
You don't say.
the West Africans. And so this whole industry popped up for repurposing goods these used clothing pieces coming from America.
So they're getting is this what we're talking about where it's the Eagles beat the Patriots, but they get the Patriots win t-shirts and stuff? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so all this stuff was jumped on the Uganda.
History is a whole lot different over there.
Yeah.
Poor guys.
That's true. Yeah.
They're like, damn, these guys are winning everything. They're winning nothing.
Oh my God, that's so true. So what's interesting is that when that first started happening, the Ugandans referred to the clothes that came from the U.S. through these bins. They referred to them as dead man's clothes because that was the only way that they could explain why somebody would get rid of their clothes is because they died.
Oh. Because that's the only way they did it.
Yeah, you don't give away your clothes.
They don't have hand-me-downs and shit over there?
Well, I mean, now they do, but I at the time, in the 70s, when this phenomenon was a new thing, they were like, okay, whatever the word was,
Fair enough.
dead man's clothes.
Yeah.
Okay, so a whole industry pops up, right? You got sewers, you got dyers, you got marketers, you got sellers. I have a whole bunch of things, amazing things to talk to you about this, but I don't know if we'll get to them. But anyway, some women actually emerge very wealthy because they're really good at repurposing the stuff for Ugandan fashion sensibilities and selling this stuff. And then the women end up buying Mercedes. And then that ends up spawning this whole, you know about this? You're nodding your head.
I'm nodding your head.
Alessi, yeah, you're over here the whole goddamn thing.
Well, we just know because California, we talk it's known just how the commerce and with clothes go. I grew up we always go to Goodwill and in my schools they always teach you you want to donate here and give this to this. So I grew up around this. This to me is it's it's not like new. Some of it is, but there's
Yeah.
facets of it where it's like, yeah, I know this.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.